Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, leading behind the scenes. With me as co-host, Miranda Barrett. Welcome,
Hello.
Miranda.
Thank you.
And we've got a great guest. Mandy, can you introduce yourself to everybody listening?
Sure. I am Mandy Burge with Petra Coach. I'm the Director of Operations.
So for people who don't know what Petra Coach is, Mandy, a quick sentence about who Petra Coach is.
Petra Coach, we're a coaching organization for typically small to medium businesses. We work with them to implement the Rockefeller habits over the period of typically 2 years, and we do meeting rhythms and then culture initiatives as well.
So this is great. Miranda and I also know the entrepreneurial founder of Petra Coach, Andy Bailey. I'd consider him a very good friend. We go back a long ways. And I think that what you shared as your napkin is really interesting to me. So could I get you to share it out loud with the listening audience?
Sure. My napkin is great leaders have high expectations for their teams, but even higher expectations for themselves.
So why did you choose that as being your napkin to share with us today?
You know, I thought a lot about myself as a leader, and then I thought a lot about the leadership that I've experienced in working with Andy, and I thought a lot about the leadership that I get to see working with all these different organizations. So I've been in around 380 or so planning sessions, so I've seen all these different leaders, and the commonality I think that I see for both myself and for other people is this goal setting, this really high level of expectations. And the more I kind of thought about it, I kind of realized that that was something that I've always had myself personally. As a child, my mom would always say, you have really high expectations in your relationships with other people. It's only going to disappoint you. I would constantly find myself, disappointed or upset because something didn't go the way that I had envisioned it in my head going. And she said, you set the bar really, really high. And it was maybe a negative thing or difficult for me as I was younger. But then as I kind of grew into my professional role, I've really found my team of people that have that really same high expectation. And I've kind of like found my niche here at Petra, and it's wonderful.
So Mandy, I really like that and I relate to it myself. I'm just curious, one of the experiences I've had when working as sort of the middle person in between an entrepreneur who has really high expectations of the team and then being you and then sort of the team that you manage. Do you find that sometimes it's causing stress on the team that they sort of expect that being one step away from the entrepreneur with these high expectations, you're going to be sort of the middle person who translates that and keeps things a little bit calmer? Or do you find that really gives people an opportunity to raise the bar on what they deliver?
100%. I tend to be kind of that middle person. I like to help add that barrier where possible. We interviewed somebody the other day and they said, what's one of the biggest challenges about working with Petra? And I said, you're surrounded by a lot of really strong-minded entrepreneurs in this organization, especially one being Andy. And I said, as much as you think you're going to work, if you're going to work here, he's going to outwork you here. And so I said, you need to have really high expectations and make sure that when you say you're going to do something, you do those things that you say you're going to do. It's part of our hiring process, and so I think that helps in our team of finding people that are self-motivated and self-driven already. If we have to have somebody in this group that's going to be told what to do, that needs checkup, that needs monitoring, we are driving 100 miles an hour, and there's just nobody in the room that really has time to do that. And so I think that because we have that level of leadership that everything is up here, everybody just wants to work and be held to those same standards and the same accountability.
Yeah, one of the things I enjoyed hearing you say is you talked about that as even being part of the onboarding or recruiting process, right, Mandy? You said that this is something that you articulate, that it doesn't matter where you're going to be at, Andy's going to be one step ahead. How does that show up? Because I know that I know Andy is also being a very collaborative, supportive kind of person as well. So it's not a competition that he's one step ahead. It's the expectations, I think, that you're talking about, right?
Correct. I think that as a group, we really expect so much of each other because we would do so much for each other. And so that's why that expectations is so high. There's probably nothing in the organization that everybody hasn't done. And so that's my personal leadership, is I don't like to ask anybody to do something that I haven't done myself. So if I'm asking somebody to go travel on a Saturday or do 6 planning sessions back to back into the weekend, Andy's done it, I've done it. And so from the person that's been here the longest to the person that's been here the newest, we've all kind of been through the trenches. So it makes that leadership style a lot easier on myself. And I think that from an interview process, we work to ask as many questions and get as many stories from candidates as possible. Tell me a story when you did this. Tell me a story when that. We have our 6 core values. So we make sure that we ask somebody to give an example of each one of those, how that relates to them, so that we can really make sure from a culture perspective that they are in this group, that they fit the culture, and that all we have to do is really train them and the core values are already given.
So you guys are in a really intense place as a company. I know you've just been growing so fast and having so much success, which has just been inspiring to watch over the years. I worked with Andy right from the very beginning when Petra was getting started. But I'm wondering, that kind of intensity of an environment just constantly around the clock, what kind of toll does that take on your team? And then how do you manage that and sort of keep them performing at a high level through this sustained period of intense activity?
The good news for us is that our business tends to be a little cyclical in nature. So we have these really, really high periods of intensity where everybody is on the road a lot. We're doing a tremendous amount of planning sessions and we're all doing it at the same time. And so there's not, some people that are out and some people that are in. Everybody is kind of out and about, really making an impact with these organizations. And then we get somewhat downtime or a little bit of a break in our world where we can kind of come back in, work on the business, work to improve it. What are those goals that we're doing for ourselves personally, and then kind of go back out on the road. We do have a really, really high level of appreciation in our culture. One of our core values is please and thank you, say it and mean it. And so in the interview process, we talk about what does it look like, how do you appreciate others? How many handwritten notes have you written this week in the last month? Everybody has kind of our little thank you bag that we have all of our different thank you cards, and they fly around this office like crazy. I have a stack, it's actually right behind the computer here, but I have a stack probably this big of 400 thank you cards from people that we work with, but more than anybody, probably from this team. And so when you've had that long week or when you've been out and about, it means a lot to come back and have your desk kind of full of all these different appreciations and notes and trinkets. I always tell the story of when I was on maternity leave with my very first child. I was out, for 3 months and doing the hardest work that I've ever done, not feeling super appreciated. My husband was doing the best he could. Baby obviously can't appreciate you. And so it just felt really unfulfilling for me at that time. Dreaded coming back to work, so I wanted to be home with my little baby. Came back and literally the office was covered in big sheets, big pieces of paper from all of our team where everybody had written on it. We'd had clients kind of write me welcome back letters, and that sense of appreciation just flooded and kind of made me feel so much better, made me feel good to be back at work. And I shared that story in one of our planning sessions with a group, and there was a gentleman there that had just had a baby, and he said he went home and wrote his wife a letter of appreciation and let her know how hard he was working and the impact that made on him. And that is kind of that's what we do is, we live it, we share it, and then share it with other people so that they can go have that same impact.
Yeah.
I love that. Mandy, let me ask you, does the intensity of the work and the growth of the organization get balanced off by the appreciation? And I know that, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, when we get really passionate about what we want to do, that intensity for that growth almost goes on without exhaustion. Like I know that I can feel like I can just go 2-3 days solid, straight, back to back, end to end. And you and I sort of met in that environment when it was a conference, it was back to back, end to end, and that energy level is unbelievably high and intense. How do you help manage the leader's energy to not overwhelm the team? Because that can happen, right?
It happens a lot, actually. I think with entrepreneurs, it's a new idea a minute, and that idea is like the best idea they've ever had, and we have to go implement it right now.
I thought that was just me.
This is the best idea. Nobody's ever thought of this before. Everybody go do it right now.
Why weren't we doing it yesterday?
And next week there's a new one. And then it's probably in opposition to the one that we had last week is a lot of times what we see in our world, you know. So we have, this is the new way we're doing it. This is the best process. And then, no, this is the best process. So we do have a lot of that. I like to be, as much as I can, the point person for actually taking charge and taking ownership of those ideas. Because I've worked with Andy for 12 years. And so that gives me a really unique perspective, and that I have really great insight into, in my opinion, what I think is going to be something that's going to be sustaining in the business, and it's actually going to do something that we need long term, and something that's more of a fleeting thought. And so I tend to be that that next step, or that barrier to say, let's actually start with this one and roll this one out, and we'll hold these other threes kind of in my pocket for the next time. And so if I'm not there, it is a little bit, I was out, like I said, on maternity, and it was a little chaotic, I think, for the 3 months that I was out. I'm back now, and being that barrier has been immensely helpful, I think, for Andy to help filter those ideas, and then for my team as well, because they're looking at me saying, which ones are we actually doing? I was told to do this and this and this, and I'm doing what was told. And so having that middle person is really, really helpful.
So, I mean, working with Andy for 12 years, I mean, the trust that's between you guys at this point must be really incredible and make for a great working environment. But I'm curious, like, when you're going a mile a minute, and you said that, you know, no matter how hard Andy's working, everyone's working, you know, Andy's at next level, and I've totally witnessed that myself. How do you communicate it then? Like, there's got to be points, you know, you've got 2 young kids, you're working really hard. Like, what happens when you just, that the bucket can't hold another drop of water and everything's just about to snap? I mean, I know I've certainly been there. I've had meltdowns in the office. And when you're in a safe place, you know, with your manager, with your entrepreneur, you know, you can have that open communication. So I'm curious, how do you make that work when you've got someone who's got such high expectations of you? You don't want to disappoint them, like, ever, on a deeply personal level, but there's times when you just hit that tipping point.
We do, I feel like in our organization, we do a really good job of communicating of those different ideas and those things that have to get done, which ones are really high priority and crucial, and then which ones are like filler. And without having that system in place, I think for an organization, it can make them crash, because I think a lot of people struggle with, if I have all these different projects and tasks and initiatives that I'm working on, they all feel really important. This person thinks that this one's important. So for myself, I'd like to know when does this need to be done by, what's the expectation of this, and we always start with the outcome in mind. So if the outcome is this particular item needs to be done by the end of the month, I can know where that is and prioritize it and work towards that. And so I think that is like, it's basic. I feel like all these things are just kind of basic, but you'd be surprised by how many organizations don't do it. Because we do business coaching, we have to kind of eat our own dog food, which is really nice. And we do a lot of those basics. So communicating when the task is due, the importance of the task, I think, is kind of basic. And then in our world, if people get to that breaking point, I've been there. I've been, I think, in a hotel room in Canada last year, just crying, like, I don't think I can do this anymore. Flexibility is key in our world. So work really hard and then play hard. If people need time off, if you need a little bit of an extra break, if you want to leave early to, you know, go to get your hair done, or whatever those things are, we're a really flexible team. It helps with hiring too, because we work hard and we play hard. So it kind of counterbalances there.
I know getting my hair done is a really important therapeutic thing.
I could talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but Mandy, I think one of the things I think you didn't flinch in talking about is the fact that there are those breakdowns, right? There are those moments where it's just like it's beyond eye level, and you're feeling like you're sinking. And I was thinking about some of the really important people in my team that I have that relationship with. And it's amazing how we have this almost nonverbal language where they will tell me, I need a break. And I have to give them the support to let them freak out and be there for them on both ends of that. And I know that each time that's happened, it's built trust between us, because they know that I'm there for them. But I'm trying to think about how daunting that must be the first time that happens. Like, for Jesslyn or for anybody on my team, how that feels. How did Andy show up the first time that happened? Can you go back to that level, and how did he create the space that it was safe enough for you to say, that's it, I can't do it, I'm out?
It's certainly been a tremendous level of trust and respect built over time. I feel comfortable now to have those conversations and to, if I'm in a place that I'm not okay, to have that open conversation. Mandy and Andy probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago, probably not in that same space, and so I tend to lead the same way in that I'm able to build trust with the team over time, but I don't think that it's automatically given day one. He's probably a little bit more trusting than I am. I tend to be a little bit skeptical from time to time, but I find that, if you have that, then you can have those open conversations. And then I, in turn, do that with my team. So with my team, I have a series of people that I work with. We do 2-weekers. So every 2 weeks, I sit down with those folks. We do one-on-one conversations. And there's tears sometimes in those, unfortunately, when we're at those really high level, almost breaking points. But having somebody, I think, to open up to and to have those conversations to and to feel respected and trusted. If you don't have that on a team, it's going to be hard for you to be there long term. You're just not going to feel like you have the support you need.
So I want to give a quick plug for Andy's book, which is amazing, which of course I have my autographed copy right here. No Try, building a business on purpose, alignment, and accountability. And I love the little paragraph, a couple pages actually, that you've got in here. I want to read a sentence. I think it's so relevant to the napkin you shared. You wrote, "It's a lot of work and the expectations in our organization are high, but I love that because it means I can expect really great things from my team." I know, managing a team, there's inevitably times where somebody who's, generally a high performer goes through a period where they let something drop, or maybe something important drop. Can you talk with me about a time, whether with Petra or in a past situation, where someone that you had a high trust relationship with let something fall through the cracks or disappointed you really, and how you handled that?
We do have that from time to time. Every person can only juggle so many different things. I feel comfortable knowing that with my team, I can kind of hand the monkey off my back to somebody else and then they have it and I don't have to check in. But time to time, those things drop. And when those conversations do have to be had, typically that's when the tears are involved. It's having that really difficult conversation about, I trusted you to get this done. I thought we were on the same page. What happened, finding out the why to fix it. And if it's, I'm overworked, I can't do these things anymore. The feedback that I hear is I wish that I would have known that information ahead of time. And it's just it's a big level of disappointment. And I think in our organization, a lot of others, the disappointment a lot of times is more hurtful for myself or maybe for that person than being reprimanded. It's somebody being disappointed on you is a bigger kind of crush to the ego than just, get me in trouble or send me home or write me up or whatever the thing is. Like, let me just get in trouble and move on. But that disappointment kind of lingers a little bit. And it's hard, it does kind of, I think, maybe knock the trust back just a little bit. So when I've given something to somebody on the team and it's not completed to where we need to, or the timeline or the outcome and everything was clearly stated kind of on our end, it does maybe put a little bit of a timeout in the trust, and you have to kind of build it back up a little bit, just to make sure that we're back on that same level that we were before. If it continues to be an issue, we have to address that and make decisions. But for the most part, it's, corrected. It's a one-time thing, and it's always because there's a lot on the plate is when I find that happens the most.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question on that one, because this is something that I've struggled with, having high expectations for my team. Do you ever kind of find yourself questioning whether what's happening is a case of you having maybe unreasonably high expectations, or that someone is not able to meet, or that someone just genuinely not delivering? I mean, having high expectations myself, sometimes you catch yourself to like, oh, am I just overthinking this or making something too unreasonable, or, they're just not doing it the way that I would do it. And how do you kind of temper your response there?
I think that because in our organization, most tasks everybody has done at some point, I have a really in-depth knowledge of what the average expectation should be there. And so if the feedback is that's not possible, we have this, you've seen the cover of the book, No Try. So when somebody says, I've done everything that I can, that's not possible, I'll try to get that done, we have words in our organization that are just no-nos. Like literally when somebody says it, everybody else in the room kind of cringes a little bit, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they just said that in front of everybody. That's really awkward. It's like worse than a cuss word. Everybody cusses around here, but you don't say try. Like that's a big no-no. And so there are words like that, you know, when I hear somebody say, I've done everything that I can do, drives me over the edge. Like there's always things that you can do. And for the most part, I'm going to say 90% of the time I know because I've done it and I've lived it and I've experienced it. And so let's figure out what's in your way. Let's figure out why things aren't, like, let's go backwards and try to fix it. Because what we can't have is somebody just saying, that's not possible to get done, or I've done everything that I can do. Because there's always something else you can do, and it's possible because somebody else on this team typically has done it or done some version of it, or I've seen it done somewhere. So let's go find somebody else that's done it, talk with them, and learn from their best practices. There's 100 different action items you could do rather than just saying it's not possible.
So Mandy, I know this is almost impossible for you to think of, but what about a time when, and I'm going to say that maybe you and Andy fell out of alignment or missed expectations in some kind of way. And I want to talk about it more, that Andy was out of alignment with you, not you out of alignment with Andy, but the other way around. How have you supported him along that side? Because sometimes I think as the leader, we're so focused on what's coming that we forget where we are. I mean, like for me, sometimes I just forget where I am, and I'm in such a safe place with my team that I will almost be living in the future and not see some of the things that are happening right in front of me. So has that ever happened? How do you support him, and what does that look like?
It's a really great question. I think that the more I talk with different entrepreneurs and work with different businesses, I swear they're all the same. I think that Andy lives permanently in the future. You know, here's where the business is going. We have our painted picture. Everybody knows it. We chant it here like it's our mantra. And so when we're all looking at that direction, somebody has to be in the present saying, wait, this isn't happening, or this is kind of off the rails a little bit. And in our world, that's me. So I'm the person that kind of looks at what's going on in our business right now, where Andy is living out here in the future. And we have had hiccups, you know, things that we are projecting about our business, and here's where we're going to be by the end of this year. And when we're halfway through the year, it's July, and things are not lining up, I have to be kind of the one to raise the red flag and say, our projections are wrong. And from an entrepreneur, from Andy, it's, you know, it's not wrong. This is where we're going. This is where I said we're going. What do we have to do to fix it to get there? And sometimes it's not a fixing to get there. It's we need to change our course. And I think that that's a really difficult conversation to have. Because we've worked together so long, I feel comfortable having that conversation, and I feel that my opinions are respected and heard really well from him. So sometimes I will collect information from the team, and I'm kind of the messenger, so to say, good, bad, or otherwise. I also feel like sometimes I don't want to say a pass, but if somebody else were to say the same thing, maybe there would be a different response than if I say it. It is heard a little bit better, and sometimes respected a little bit better, just because of our relationship together over the last 12 years. And I mean, I literally, from coming right out of school, he was the first employer that I had outside of like restaurant jobs and stuff in school. And so he's kind of molded me and formed me into the type of person that I am today from a working perspective. And so a lot of my same insights are very similar to his because we've worked together for so long, and pretty much my entire professional career has been working with him.
Hey, Miranda, I'm just going to jump in with another follow-up question because I know, Mandy, you're a DISC expert, right? I mean, you train DISC, you teach DISC, you help organizations understand DISC, and DISC is, of course, a profiling tool to help leaders and teams and team members within the team understand personality difference and communicate across that barrier. What I find interesting, and I find this interesting of a lot of people that sit in your seat, like Miranda, like yourself, that you have adapted in natural states that are wildly different. Yeah. Meaning that at work, you operate in a very different way than you do in the world. And I wonder about that. And it only just struck me the way you just said that, because you're actually speaking in two different character traits in two different environments. Your team has one way, and then you have another way with Andy. And Miranda, I know I've heard you say this before, and it just sort of hit me. It just struck me. It's like, hey, let's have this conversation, because I think it's fascinating, because Jess Lynn does that to me. She is totally different with everybody else in the world, than she is with me, and she knows what it takes to get the message across to me. Let's talk about that. Is that a thing? Am I right in observing that?
You are correct. Yes, 100%. So my natural disc style, I'm a DI. So when I work with my team, D is that dominant style, and the I is the influencer. So I am very, very action oriented. Like if you look, that's my number one priority. So let's take action, let's get it done, let's move it. And I would do that with my team. That works well with Andy as well. I have to, though, slide into kind of, so if you look at the kind of the disc circle, my dot would be at the top. I have to kind of slide into those lower quadrants when I work with him, sometimes to match his style. So he has a really high C or conscientiousness style. So he is very, very detailed. I call it anal. He calls it OCD, whatever you want to call it. So everything has to be exactly perfect. And that is not my style at all. I'm like, let's just do some action and get it out the door. If there's a typo, it's fine. If it's not 100%, it's fine. Like, I just want to move it. But he has this kind of perfectionist standpoint that I don't have at all. And so I have to really flex into that style a lot more when working with him than I do naturally. And then from like a completely personal perspective, I think that sometimes I am driving execution and making decisions all day long. Then when I get home at the end of the day, I'm so exhausted and I just want to go in like the total opposite quadrant. You know, I want somebody else to make that decision for me. I don't want to pick where we're going to dinner. I don't want to pick, you know, what the kids are wearing for school tomorrow. Like, I don't want to do any of it. Like, just make the decision and just let me be supportive. Let me be helpful in our environment at home, and just not be that driver like I am all day long.
Linda, do you do that too?
Oh, completely. It made me laugh just hearing that, because it sounds so familiar. Because I'm also a high D. One of the few staff members at EO actually that was a high D. Almost everyone else was a super high I as a natural. And then adapted, you see that D come way down on the adapted for work, because working with entrepreneurs, if you come at them as a high D, they're going to immediately try to out D you, and nobody wins. And
we don't do that at all.
No, never, of course. But I think where it's helpful, though, is those rare times where working with an entrepreneur and they don't know what to do. Like, either, you know, they're exhausted, they're confused, they're overwhelmed, whatever. That's when I think people like Mandy and I can kind of step in and say, you know, okay, time out. Let's back up. Let's do these. You know, here's what we need to do. Here's the direction I propose. And so we can fill that void sometimes if there is a void. If there's not a void, you know, we're equally flexible to be able to step back and take those ideas and see, here's what we need to do to implement, and then turn around to our teams. And again, that's where that D comes out. I mean, I'm happy as if I'm got a room full of people on a clipboard, you know, like that's our natural, if we were in a zoo, that'd be, I think, our natural environment, the habitat they put us in. But you can't be that way, you know, when you're working with the leader of an organization all the time. I mean, there are certainly situations where I think when there's a void, you can jump in and fill it, but you've got to be able to kind of bounce back and forth between those two things. And similar to Mandy, I mean, man, I cannot plan a family vacation. Like, when I'm home,
I can't either.
That comes off. You know, I'll plan, you know, 2-week complex global, you know, delegation trips, you know, with 20 different events. But then, you know, a weekend at the beach, I'm like, no, I'm out. I'm done. Someone else do this.
You know, it's really fun so I'm thinking back, because we do disc profiling as part of our onboarding process. And I remember Just Lynn's disc, looking at that inconsistency, and I just didn't understand it, and I had to actually just straight shoot with her right in the interview and say, hey, look, your disc makes no sense to me. Like, I don't understand this. Like, well, how are you? It shouldn't exist like this. You've got opposites in this assessment. You shouldn't be able to answer these questions honestly this way. Like, what's going on? And then she just sort of told me that I'm almost the same story that you guys just told me, that you have these different home and business lives, and it looks differently. So I think that's interesting. I mean, I think it's a really interesting similarity.
Well, I think, you know, I'll jump in, go, but I think that the danger, you've got a lot of strengths having a high D as your second in command, but the danger is if they don't have a way to flex that D muscle. Amanda, you're the expert, but I know the times that I've been the least effective and engaged in professional environments was where I had no outlet for that, you know, dominating, directing, to be able to take charge of a situation where I was being, you know, micromanaged or being constantly corrected or whatever it was, where I felt like I couldn't take ownership of a situation. And I think, you know, if you can have a really, really effective high D on helping lead your team, but if you don't give them that freedom, then that muscle just kind of shrivels up and you just disengage. And that was an experience, that I've had recently. And you just watch yourself, that D just kind of falls out of use. And it creates an unhealthy culture, I think. So you've got to be able to, you can have a super high performer as long as you're giving them that freedom to be able to use it. Does that sound right, Mandy?
100%. I could not agree more. And that's what, in my role now, I get to do that. And if I'm in a role that I'm not able to your point, it's claustrophobic almost, so I have to be able to make those decisions and kind of implement those ideas. Sometimes where it's challenging also to have a D on leadership is when two different ideas. So Andy's a D and I'm a D, and we both have different ideas on the outcome of something, and we're both going to be pretty headstrong on it. So sometimes that can be challenging from leader to leader. I'm really adamant in my opinions and the way that I think something. I've thought it through, like, here's where I'm not really going to budge a little bit and he's not really going to budge. And so we have to kind of find our middle ground. At the end of the day, he wins because he owns the business. But I think that can be challenging, but I also think that can be really, really rewarding, because if you have a different, style, sometimes it leads a group. Ds typically are leaders in the organization and will, drive the execution of stuff. Not always, and it's not to say that different styles can't do that. It just comes more natural for that D style. And so you have to give them the room and the space to kind of naturally fall into their role. Otherwise, they'll probably change over time and move to another quadrant.
Yeah, really fascinating conversation. I think we could have a whole other page of napkin just on that conversation. Mandy, I want to really thank you for this conversation. I got a lot out of it. Miranda, last word goes to you as usual, but this was a great conversation, Mandy. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I very appreciate it.
And I guess the last word for me, I think, is nothing wrong with having high expectations when you've got that high trust with your entrepreneur.
Could not agree more. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.